Welcome to the Strange and Interesting Podcast, a show about folklore, the paranormal, urban legends, and pretty much anything else I happen to find strange or interesting. I am your host, Al, and I have a guest today, Lilse, an author and also a fellow role-playing game fan, and she's here to talk to us a little bit about Wendigo and possessions. So how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
So why don't we start, if you could please introduce yourself?
Okay, so my name is Lilse Asalt. I'm a professional web novelist. Basically, I've been writing online for about 10 years, and recently I started doing indie author stuff. I have a book called When the City Sleeps, which is out, which is it's usually I pitch it to people as Corpse Bride with Game of Thrones mixed in, and the folklore that I draw from is the kind of the Jewish folklore of the Corpse Bride, and it's essentially this mother kind of learns that her child, like she's basically an undead person who comes to the city where all different types of magic is legal, including kind of like death magic, and she's essentially like an undead person with like an empty fetus, and she kind of goes through the city with all these like arcane types of necromancy and magic, and she is basically, she uses kind of these a little bit more dark types of magic to figure out what happens to her child. So that is the book I wanted to talk about.
Now, you mentioned Corpse Bride and Jewish folklore. Is that something related to the Dubuk, I think it's called? Something about a spirit trapped in a box, I think?
There is, are you talking about Pandora's Box? Pandora's Box, that's Greek myth. I have heard of that as Jewish folklore, but I've primarily heard the Pandora myth a little bit more. But I do think that does come from the creationist myth as well. So, yeah, that is correct. You are correct. Yep.
Yeah, because I remember, I don't know if you've ever watched Ghost Adventurers, but the host of that, Zach Bagans, he has a paranormal museum that he does in Las Vegas.
Yes,
and
he lives the dream life. He's the professional demonologist. He's so cool. I'm obsessed with him. Absolutely. I love that show.
Yeah, my wife and I enjoy watching that show. And I think he was mentioning he had a Dubak box in, again, I might be mispronouncing it, but he had one of those boxes in his museum.
Are you talking about the DYBBUK box? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I think it's something like that, yeah.
I am reading a book about that, and I started it yesterday. I wish I had finished it, and I could have had this conversation with you. But no, I haven't quite studied that currently. But that is my current fixation. So,
though I have to admit, sometimes I've always found it kind of funny in a way how he'll do the stuff like where he's almost very confrontational with the ghosts. It's like if we're at a place where the ghosts were known to like push people off of, the stairs or something, he'll like stand on top of the stairs and dare the ghost to push him. Though there was one episode I remember where they were talking about reading from an ancient Sumerian text that is so dangerous they're not going to give the name of it. And I remember some of the verses they were reading. It's like, dude, that's the Necronomicon. It's not real. Come on, Zach. Have you written any other books?
I'm actually also a medical student. So basically, before I had started medical school, there was a book that I had written called Kills of Her, which I was going to I did get like an agent and stuff with it, but it was kind of like I had to choose between two careers. So currently, other than my When the City Sleeps, I don't have anything out right now, but that book I was going to traditionally publish, Kills of Her, I'm going to try to publish that this year because I have the cover, I have everything done with it. So I don't have I have web novels that I published kind of with companies that are more, it's kind of like basically you have to download an app and then through the app it is how you read those books. But it's not quite the same as like a book. It's more like a online kind of thing. So.
Okay. So you mentioned you're a medical student. Has any of your studies that influenced any of your work?
Definitely. I have several projects that are in work. My undergraduate is in history and engineering. So like basically if I hadn't taken this path, I would have gotten a master's degree in folklore. So I would say I really love mixing folklore and science. I think it's like one of my favorite things. I think we were talking about the Dubik box. I've recently been kind of putting together all the mythologies with like ophthalmology. So like kind of like this like eye-based magic system is something that I'm kind of working with right now. I'm trying to get that together into like a really interesting book. Yeah, I love mixing stuff together. It's definitely one of my joys.
It's interesting with folklore because, occasionally we do hear about a lot of folk remedies where, like, if you have a cold, this type of herb. And I think there's actually been some scientific studies into these folk remedies to determine, okay, do they work? And if they do work, how do they work? When we've talked before, you've also said that you play Dungeons and Dragons. And so you've started doing some local campaigning at a local coffee house.
Yes. I love DMing even more than I love playing, but, so I started, so there's a lot of, like, Dungeons and Dragons, it's such a ginormous mythology, so I started with something that's called the Candlekeep Mysteries, which is, like, this anthology of, like, smaller things, and oh my gosh, it's so fun. I love kind of putting, like, mechanisms into the, like, whatever I'm designing, so, like, the current one-shot that I have is basically, it's a timed one-shot, and then it moves every 15 minutes, 30 minutes. It's so fun to kind of mix game creation with storytelling. It's so much fun. It's one of my favorite things I've ever done.
That is one of the things that is fun about running games, whether it's D&D or any other system, is just, you've got this story and you're trying to move it along and trying to throw different hooks at people. It's like, currently, I'm running a session of Caught in the Backrooms, a role-playing game system I wrote, and right now my party is trying to search down someone who's manufacturing an illegal drug. So it's been fun. They've been jumping to all these different levels, and it's like every time they meet one of the members of this gang, it's always like, well, I don't know how to find him, but this other guy does. So it's been fun, kind of sending them around in circles and just playing with their minds.
That sounds like you're a very devious DM.
I can be, yes. So how long have you been playing D&D?
Probably about a year. I had my first session, so in the coffee house that I kind of go to pretty often, he's a international best-selling author, but, hopefully someday that'll be me. But, so I have this like little rivalry with him, and he introduced me to it, and now we are fighting. Probably about a year. And like, I was kind of introduced to this one shot, and it was a very simple one shot. It was kind of like in a tavern, and basically the dungeon level is like right below it, and like there's supposed to be a wedding in the tavern, and then the bride's head gets cut off by a bunch of like orcs, and I was just like, this is really weird. And then there's like goblins and they spawn. It's just like, I was like, this is a really simple story and I don't like it.
Classic way to begin any D&D adventure in a tavern. I do enjoy throwing puzzle encounters at my players, but I know that can be kind of difficult sometimes because, of course you want to make it challenging, but you don't want it to take too long.
Oh, that's the main thing.
Because I have this one puzzle I do in an adventure, and it's like, sometimes a party can solve it in like less than 5 minutes. And I've had some groups where it's taken them like 20 and I have to hold their hand all the way through. So yeah, it's definitely a mixed bag.
Yeah, I like changing the environment constantly. Like for my one shot, the environment changes every 5 minutes. And then I have like, there's like the health decreases. Like every 5 minutes, the health decreases by 1. And then every 15 minutes, the environment changes. So it's like, I like to have more panic settings, yeah.
Just kind of keep the pressure on them so they don't spend too much time dilly-dallying.
Mm-hmm.
Well, speaking of dilly-dallying, I think we've dilly-dallied a bit, so let's get to today's topic, and that is the Wendigo. And we're also going to be talking about possession because from what I understand, possession and the Wendigo actually do go hand in hand. What are some of the different types of possession?
So I would say I think you used a great example, which is the Wendigo. It's an example of cultural spirits, and basically it's kind of an example of cultural possession. A lot of the time, Wendigos are of Native American origin, so a lot of times when there is possession, it is kind of confined to that community. For me, whenever I think of possession, I think of like it in terms of like how far removed it is. Like I would say there's primary possession, like when there's a shaman or when there's like a priest and they're channeling the spirit. And I would say that would be kind of more like primary possession, where it's the person wants that to happen to them. And a lot of the times, like those people are kind of brought into certain situations where someone is deceased or there's kind of like a missing child or like there's something that they're there to kind of help with. And that also kind of goes in together with cultural. A lot of the times, North Asian cultures have that, where they kind of in Mongolian cultures, they have that where they have that kind of possession is a little bit more common. And then I would say also maybe secondary possession, where not necessarily a shaman or someone who's kind of like a medium who's channeling those types of spirits into their body. It's kind of like someone who's like, usually it's someone who has like a weak mind, so like sometimes it's a child or it's like a woman or it's like an older person who's like elderly, and they kind of they get possessed through chance, where instead of them wanting that to happen, it kind of just happens because they're like in the wrong place at the wrong time.
More familiar with demonic possession and satanic possession because I'm old enough to remember the Satanic Panic, so I remember hearing all about how, people claiming that, playing Dungeons and Dragons and role-playing games would lead you into Satanism, and that would lead you into being possessed by a demon, and that would turn you into a mass murderer. So the 80s were crazy times, but then again, there was a lot of cocaine flowing around back then, so maybe that was behind some of it. What is the Wendigo?
The Wendigo, I would say, is I would call it like a creature of greed, in the sense that it is a person who has this kind of like a natural hunger, and they're kind of like driven by it to madness, and sometimes it causes like uncontrollable behaviors, and I would say that can like manifest in like a hungry ghost.
Because I thought I've read a little bit about it, and it has something to do with, I remember the greed, and usually it's at least the descriptions I've always seen, it's always pictured as this naught creature that's almost skeletal in a way. You can see its like ribs and it's...
Yeah. No, it's a skeleton. It's like what is that? Like a deer skull.
Yeah.
It's a deer skull, and then like it's a dog, but it's like, it can get up on its hind legs. I always hear stories of it like running after people or like running after cars and stuff, and then they realize like it's not a dog or a deer, it's the thing.
And I'm not sure if the popular culture image of the Wendigo with the, this like dog man hybrid with the deer antlers, I don't know if that's like based on authentic Native American descriptions or if it's just like from popular culture and it's something that's caught on. Kind of like how with the gray aliens, where when I think it was Betty and Barney Hill described them, and then all of a sudden that's how everyone was describing, alien encounters, these little short gray guys with the black eyes. How does one get possessed by a Wendigo?
I would say usually it's, in terms of like getting possessed by a Wendigo, I would say if you, like, I think I talked about the different types of possession. Primary possession, I would say, is caused by when the shaman is essentially trying to complete a task. So I would say, there's two types of magic. I would say, like, there's white magic and black magic, even though, like, I know that's not, like, the politically correct term for it. I think a lot of Wendigos are considered to be black magic, so it's the person is trying to do something bad, like curse somebody, or like they have like a blood feud with another family or like another tribe, I guess, because a lot of the times culturally this happens with Native Americans. So I would say that a lot of the times it is due to something that kind of causes very strong emotions. And I would say like the strong emotions is what's like really necessary. And then I would say for secondary possession, especially if it's like someone who's unrelated, it would kind of be like someone who is in kind of a very bad circumstance where there's like very unstable emotions. Someone who's died recently, or there's some kind of massacre, like if someone's missing and there's like very strong emotions kind of from the parents or from family members, and then they kind of are possessed as a result of being in the vicinity of something really bad.
So you mentioned like emotions being partly responsible for possession. So I can understand the case of Wendigo, since it usually ties in with greed and gluttony. I mean, those can definitely be very powerful emotions. So are there any documented historical cases of Wendigo possession that you're familiar with?
There was a case that happened in Canada in the 1930s. I don't remember the exact name of the person who was included in that, but essentially there is something that is kind of called like the Wendigo defense, in the sense that if there are young Native American men who commit crimes, they murder someone, a lot of the times it's not just Wendigos. Sometimes people who are from Caribbean cultures, who have Caribbean cultures or African cultures, they also have like something similar. But basically, if they murder someone, they say that they were possessed by a Wendigo, and the crime happened as a result of the possession and not a result of them. And it's kind of used as a defense to kind of get out of a murder charge. I think it's 1930s Alberta, Canada was one of the cases that I was looking at. So I would say it happened once in a while.
I do remember hearing the occasional story about people claiming demonic or satanic possession caused them to commit a crime. There was a show I used to watch. I think it was in like, I don't remember if it was late 80s, early 90s. It may have been more early 90s, but it was called Sightings. And it was a paranormal show where they would usually be 3 segments. Like they might do one on UFOs, and then one on Bigfoot, and then one on, some strange cryptid that is very localized. But I remember they were doing one episode about Satanism, and there was a guy there who had claimed that the devil made him kill his girlfriend. So probably something similar to that, where people are hoping that maybe they'll be declared mentally ill, so they think they're going to get off easier.
Have you seen that documentary about the one town in Alaska called, I think it's Portlock Village, Alaska? Yeah, I think that a lot of the times they talk about how there's like a Wendigo that like haunts Portlock. So basically, every time they try to resettle Portlock, like it goes up in flames, and they're like, the Wendigo has come back, even if the people are Native American, or even if it's just, a tent that is missing something. You're like, it's the Wendigo. I think there's a couple of shows on it as well.
Because I have heard of that town. There's a show that my wife watches. I think it might be, I don't know if it's Alaskan Gold Rush, but it's one of those shows that takes place up there. And I remember seeing one episode on Portlock. And again, I don't remember if it was Alaskan Gold Rush or if it was just a show. It's like we were, flipping through the channels and like, hey, this looks interesting. Let's watch this. And I have heard of that town and how they tried to resettle it. Hey, there's a future episode I could do for this show, Portlock.
The thing about Portlock that makes it so interesting is there's so many different theories on like what makes it so strange. There is an alien abduction theory, and they think that the aliens are communicating to their mothership through the like different tree stumps that have like little bits of metal in them, or like some like carvings. It's so interesting. You should definitely. Yeah, it's like an internet rabbit hole that you could just like go down for hours.
It's like I can picture what's that guy from like Ancient Aliens, Gregorio something. He's got like the hair that's like, it looks like he stuck his finger in an electrical socket because it's always standing up, and he's always like holding his hands in front of his face. He's like, aliens! This ancient piece of pottery is obviously too advanced for the Egyptians. There's only one possible explanation.
My favorite part of that show is like whenever it's like ancient alien theorists, and it's so like.
Some of those shows that do talk about like the paranormal and, you know, these not necessarily just paranormal, but strange things, they always have interesting narrators. Like, I don't know if you've ever watched Curse of Oak Island.
Yeah, I have watched that. I've watched a couple of, I haven't watched all 13 seasons because like I'm not insane, but I have watched episodes. It's such a good show. I love the narrator.
Oh yeah, it's because my wife and I watch and he's always like, a piece of wood from that has a nail in it. It's like, okay, that's an interesting way to, you know, narrate things. It's like, sometimes, I mean, I wonder how many people deep down, because for any listeners that are unfamiliar with Curse of Oak Island, supposedly 7 people have to die before the island is going to give up its secrets. And so far, 6 have died. So I wonder how many people deep down are thinking, okay, can't one of these people take one for the team and die so we can find out what the secret is? Okay, that's kind of a dark thought.
Yeah. I really just wonder, because like a lot of the times, the thing with Oak Island is apparently there's like a secret treasure, and they're like looking for the secret treasure, and like main thing is they're just like digging a hole, and like they've been digging that hole for 13 seasons.
Yeah. It is interesting some of the science they go in and archaeology they go into there, how like some of the rock formations there, you know, are supposed to represent different constellations. So archaeoastronomy is not something I've ever gotten into, but it sounds interesting and it sounds like it could hold, you know, some plausibility. But yeah, I mean, it is interesting. I just kind of wish they'd find something and get it over with and end the suspense. But well, then they'd have to, you know, kind of end the show, and they probably don't want to do that quite yet.
Yeah, or they'll like end the season and they'll be like, "We found a coin," and you're like, "Okay, I watched the season for a coin."
Hopefully, it doesn't turn out like The Secret of Al Capone's Vault that Geraldo Rivera did. Geraldo, he used to do a lot more like documentary type stuff, and investigative journalism, and you know, they said they found Al Capone's vault and they were going to, you know, open it, and before they opened it, you know, they went through some of the history and a little bit of information about Al Capone. And then they opened it and there was like I think an old empty bottle of whiskey or something in there. And it's like, well, that was anticlimactic. So to get back on topic, so we talked a little bit about the Wendigo and that type of possession. You also mentioned you learned a little bit about voodoo possession. So how does that work?
Voodoo is a religion that comes kind of from Ghana or West Africa, and it came to the United States basically through this transatlantic slave trade, as well as like Caribbean cultures kind of coming to America. And it's like the voodoo is a lot of the time it's like mixed, it's like kind of Christianized just because of the different mixes of cultures that happen. So voodoo is basically, a lot of the times it comes from, there's a culture called Yoruba, and it's like a tribe in Africa, and basically, they have like a maternal god, and basically the maternal god is like what they're trying to, like, it is the god that they worship in that religion, voodoo. So basically what happens sometimes, it's similar to the Wendigo in the sense that in terms of sometimes people who are from those areas, they will use that as a defense when they're like doing stuff. And it's similar, it's kind of like a folk religion in that sense. So voodoo, I would say, I've seen a little bit more of it than I've seen kind of with the Wendigo stuff. I think just because I've been like, it's something that is a little bit more in the open in the sense that, I think it's just more common in culture. Like, I see it in the airport a lot of the times. Like, you'll see little airport voodoo dolls, and you're just like, oh, this is kind of bad, but it's cute too.
I think you're right on that. Voodoo has gotten more integrated in popular culture than the Wendigo has. The only real instances of the Wendigo I can remember from popular culture is it did appear in Marvel Comics. They had the Wendigo fighting the Incredible Hulk, and that was interesting because that was the first episode that they introduced. Yeah, it was an old old issue of the Incredible Hulk, and that was actually the first episode issue where they introduced Wolverine. So there was like this 3-way battle between the Hulk, Wolverine and the Wendigo. That's probably the only real depiction of the Wendigo that I can recall from popular culture. I mean, there might be others, but I just can't think of them right now.
I see it a lot in like indie horror movies where it's just like you'll see like the deer head skull and like that is the monster, that is the kind of the thing that's haunting everyone. A lot of the times it's like low budget indie horror movies and it's always like a couple of actors, they go to like a random cabin and boom, there's a Wendigo. That's kind of usually what happens.
Yeah, they're forced to eat each other and one of them gets possessed by the Wendigo.
Yes.
I'm not sure why voodoo has gotten more prominent in popular culture.
I think it actually has to do with kind of more so with kind of cultural sensitivity, I would say, like more increase in the sense that like voodoo is something that is allowed to be openly talked about, whereas like Wendigo in general, like Native American cultures are like, you shouldn't even say it or it's gonna like bring it closer to you. Like,
okay, so that was weird. Looks like it is still recording, so hopefully I didn't lose the first half hour of our conversation. For the listeners, because I'm going to have to do some editing here, I just had a problem where my internet connection dropped, and Lilse had mentioned like the Skinwalker and the Wendigo. I remember a while ago I did a podcast episode about shadow people, and there was a name for one Native American tribe had for like a shadow person like entity, and they were saying they were afraid to mention its name because it might summon them. So I don't know, maybe by mentioning the Wendigo or Skinwalker, it summoned an entity that caused my internet connection to crash.
it's okay.
Okay, so as we were going before my internet connection dropped, so you were mentioning that you think that one of the reasons voodoo is a little more prominent in popular culture than like Wendigo possession is because Native Americans tend not to talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I have heard that with the Skinwalkers, where the Navajo do tend to be pretty secretive about that information there, and there's probably a rationale for it. I
know the rationale actually. So basically, I think it's related to the death rituals that are kind of present in Native American cultures. So one of the things that I do, I like studying folklore. So I did study a book on kind of the subject, and basically the death ritual is basically they put a plate at the edge of the table for like the person who's deceased, and it kind of lasts for like 7 days and 7 nights, and they don't talk at all. So it's kind of something that's like very kind of part of the culture where it's, you know, they kind of leave a place for the person who has passed away and kind of they give them food and stuff. So it's basically just acknowledging something and then also not acknowledging it. And also, like, I think, you're not supposed to look in the direction, and also, like, I think there's, like, knocking under the table as well, which is something that's kind of, it's really bad. It's spooky, I think.
Well, that's interesting, because, I know there's a parallel. Some military families around the holidays, if they're having, like, Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner, will sometimes have, like, a place with like a table setting there for like a member that's still overseas. And I know my local mall around Thanksgiving and Christmas, they actually in the food court, they have a setting that they put up, and, you know, just kind of a reminder that, you know, not everyone gets to be home for, you know, enjoy the holidays with their families.
I've heard of the knocking, and that's something that always sticks with me because I think that's so creepy, just to like be sitting at a table and then something like, you know, there's that like, you're in silence and all of a sudden something is knocking. But also, like, I know culturally you're not supposed to look under the table and you're not supposed to look in that direction as well. That's something that's like very common in a lot of Asian cultures as well, where they'll have like, oh, you don't say anything bad, you don't look at anything bad, and you don't listen to anything bad.
So another type of possession that I think a lot of people are familiar with, especially from pop culture, like, you know, the Exorcist, and, you know, back during the 60s and 70s, Satanism was actually very prominent in a lot of movies, and that's satanic or demonic possession.
I would say it's similar to what we said earlier in the sense that like there's primary and secondary as well. And I would say primary kind of would happen in terms of it being in more popular culture, I would say kind of people who are psychics or mediums, they would probably get possessed a lot more quickly. And also, I think a lot of the times with satanic possession, like there is a kind of institutional mechanism that you can go through in terms of the Catholic Church to kind of remove those things. And it's definitely something that has been around for a really long time because it is something that you can go and like there are people who are professional exorcists who remove those things. I would say in terms of secondary, it's similar in the sense that it's children, it's people who are in kind of environments where something, usually a lot of the times it's in terms of the secondary position, it's vocation and like there's a crime or there's miscarriage or there's kind of a suicide. So there's something like very dark or like a massacre that happened. And then the people who come next to that location a lot of the time, especially children or like people who have a little bit more weak psychology, I would say have a tendency to kind of get into that. And I would say sometimes it's mixed in with people who come from like more fundamentalist religions or kind of are exposed to heavier religious ideologies. I would say that's where it's more concentrated.
Of course, going back to the good old 80s with the satanic panic, I know that's something they, would talk about. And a lot of times the theory was that people playing around with demonic materials or reading the satanic Bible or other types of material I've heard about Ouija boards supposedly being able to cause possession, but I'm not sure if that's like an authentic belief or just something that got, was developed in pop culture and then kind of caught on in our cultural, I'm trying to think of the best way to say it, the cultural zeitgeist, or, just basic person came up with a story about possession through a Ouija board. And then someone's like, hey, that's a good idea. And they ran with it. And we started seeing more stories about that.
Well, I think a Ouija board in general, I would say, is kind of like it's opening kind of like a door to those things. And I would say that it's a conduit in the sense that it's something that can help you communicate with things. And I think when it causes problems is like when people don't understand what it is, or like when people kind of are playing with it and then kind of contact the wrong things and kind of create a gateway for something bad. Because I also know in terms of possession, like there's like different types of demons as well, and kind of there are like different levels of bad. So it's like if you get in contact with something really bad, in the sense that it's like a very powerful demon or like a very powerful entity, I think that's when it's really bad. But in general, I think it's a conduit and it's like a tool, and it depends on how you use it. And I think it's something that can be really fun if done safely, but rarely that happens because a lot of times, kids play with it or like.
One of my sister's friends back in like elementary, middle school had a Ouija board and brought it over once, and fortunately never had anything unusual happen after that. So maybe we did it right, or
probably did it wrong, which is a good thing as well.
A while ago, I was interviewing a gentleman we were talking about Salem and the witch trials, and I had mentioned that it's like I never really had a genuine paranormal experience, and I guess depending on who I ask, I'm either lucky or unlucky for that.
I've had a lot of paranormal experiences. Actually, what's really funny is my dad is like deathly afraid of ghosts. So like whenever we have an argument, I'm like, oh yeah, remember that time when we were in Crystal Caves in Colorado, and basically it's like an old crystal mining place, and basically I think there was children or something in the ghost tour that we went on, and like basically he like tugged on the back of my sweater, and my dad was like screamed. It was so funny.
I've heard stories about that, too, with like haunted mines, and I can, certainly understand why that could be a breeding ground for ghosts, because, well, breeding ground's probably not the best way to put it, but I can understand why there's ghost stories behind mines, because especially, mining is still dangerous today, but, back in the 1800s, or even early 1900s, it was way more dangerous. So I'm trying to think of the name of the show. There's Secret of Skinwalker Ranch. I think they've
That's
talked about it, or yeah, and I'm sure that Ghost Adventures has probably talked about mining accidents sometime in the past too. So
Yeah, there's a lot of different like mine ghosts, I would say, where they kind of say that it's one of those like kind of smaller ghosts. I would say the one it's kind of like he looks like Gollum basically, and they're like these little kind of goblin type of things, and like basically what they would do is they would like tap against the wall, and like
Tommy
when they
knockers.
stop. Yeah, that's what they're called. There you go. And then they would stop tapping. And like that's when you know either you're gonna hit oil or you're gonna die. And you're supposed to leave immediately. And they would kind of leave offerings to like the knockers and stuff. And
I used to work at an earth science museum, and one of my coworkers, I don't remember if it was his dad or his grandpa, worked in the mines in Upper Michigan. And one of the foods that's popular in this particular area, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan, are pasties. So basically it's like a pastry shell that usually has like meat, potatoes, and vegetables in it. So the miners they'd heat it up in the morning and then wrap it in foil so that it would stay warm. And then for lunch, they would peel away everything except for a small part because you didn't have time to go wash your hands. But there was a tradition where you would leave, the part that you held the pasty by as an offering for the Tommyknockers.
And also, like, what's really interesting is, like, the Tommyknocker cake comes from, like, Scottish folklore, so, like, there's, like, a different versions of it, which, like, exist in the UK, which is super interesting, and it's, like, it's the same thing, where they, like, leave food, and they knock. Like, we're kind of united by this kind of thread of folklore that came from the UK, and, like, we still have it. It's still there.
At least in Wisconsin, the mines we have here, a lot of the miners came from somewhere in England. It was either England or Wales. They were Cornish. I'm not sure.
It's in both. It's in like everywhere. There's like a different version of the Tommyknocker, but it's not called that. It's like it's something in Gaelic or it's something in English or whatever other English word.
It is interesting how the folklore does spread like that because of course these miners came over from England or Wales and they brought their own stories. And a while ago, I did an episode where I was talking about Paul Bunyan and lumberjacks, and a lot of the cryptids or strange creatures that they invented would often spread across North America because it was not unusual for these lumberjacks to move from camp to camp. So these various stories that they told could spread all across the US and Canada. So I always thought that was interesting. A little bit of folklore there. So before we go, do you have any social media links or sites that you would like to share?
So I did talk about my book, When the City Sleeps, which is kind of based on lesser known folklore, and it's also one of the things that I'm really passionate about is women in fantasy. So it is kind of like, I think it's so important to have, representation for like all different types of women in all ages. So I think the first thing I want to plug is definitely my book, which is When the City Sleeps by Lilse Asalt. So if you could check that out, that would be awesome. And then other than that, I am on YouTube just as Lilse Asalt if you're into kind of D&D or if you like folklore. I have a DIY folklore degree that I'm doing, and I do little video essays and I talk about kind of my progress in that. And yeah, that's basically it.
I will include those links in the show notes. So if anyone wants to check out your books or check out your YouTube. So I'd like to thank you for joining me today. And until next time, everyone, stay strange and stay interesting. You have been listening to a presentation of Point of Insanity Game Studio. Visit us on the web at www.poigamestudio.com. Follow me on most social media sites at POI Game Studio, and check out my music channel on YouTube at Al Seeger Music.